Well, sleep, it's one of the most important things you can do to stay healthy. And so many of us struggle with it. And it doesn't have to be that way because there's so many simple strategies you can do. We're going to discuss many of them in this interview with Dr. Peter Martone, who is a massive innovator in this space. And we actually worked together over the last 10 years to develop a simple strategy that can support your neck to prevent one of the single most common problems that people have with their necks, which is degeneration of their cervical spine. And thankfully, there are some simple things you can do to prevent this, and if you have it, to treat it. And with time, you will be sleeping like a champ. And I would strongly encourage you to listen to this because I think almost everyone's going to benefit from some of the tips in this. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did having a discussion with Dr. Martone.
Why is alignment so important? Body posture adjusts to head position, so the positioning of your head, and then due to the other two laws, Davis' law and Wolff's law, tissue remolds based on the stresses applied. So if you're putting yourself into a position that you fall asleep in, most people fall asleep in a position that they believe they're comfortable in, but their body, their subconscious brain feels safe. All the subconscious brain wants is safety. You want to fall asleep on your back, and what's critically important is the type of pillow that you use and that your head is not supported. Anytime you use the word support in the body is weakened. That's the adaptation to support. When you support the cervical spine, but you use the weight of the head off the back of the pillow, you're actually restructuring the cervical curve, changing your entire posture while you sleep.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And we're going to talk about a really important topic that almost every single one of you have, and most of you are unaware of it. As I was about 10 years ago, when I met a friend of mine, Dr. Peter Martone, who is going to be discussing with us some of the ways that we can address the concern that almost every one of you have, which is degeneration of your cervical spine, and that's the spine part that's in your neck. And about 80% of adults have it, and I was one of those people, but not now, because I took some corrective actions. And I was surprised I had it because I do so many things right, but due to structural issues, if you have the wrong posture, your head weighs about 10 pounds or somewhere there. Dr. Peter will enlighten us on specifically, but if you got it bent over, that's going to decimate your cervical spine. And it doesn't take much of a forward lean to do that. And, with time, as you age, you'll cause this degeneration, which is a major problem. So we're going to discuss that. And let me just share with you. I went back to, 2015. We were at an event together. I was speaking, and he confronted me about my cervical spine because of this forward neck posture. And he convinced, it was such a compelling and convincing argument that literally within a week or two, I flew up to his office in Boston and wanted to get assessed by him. He's a chiropractor, and he's really sharp. He knows his biomechanics. I think he had some training, specifically like advanced degrees in it before he went to chiropractic school. He's really good. He's one of the best out there for figuring these things out. And I think we'll take it from there. Introduce Dr. Martone, who's out of Boston. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I remember that time vividly because I was sitting there, doing my own thing. And I was eating, I don't know, maybe it was cashews or something. And I hear this voice behind me. What are you doing, Peter? What are you filling your body up with lectins? Of course you're inflamed. And I'm like, and it was you. And we had met through a mutual friend of mine, ours, years before that, Patrick Gentempo. And I go, oh, well, let me tell you something about yourself. Or you're like, oh, where do I need to be adjusted? Oh, okay. I'm like, I get this going on, this going on, this going on. You probably have a bunion down on your right foot. And that's when you took off your shoe and you're like, how do you know that? I'm like, well, the body adaptation, your posture is a battle between neurology and gravity. So the way that you stand is a product of your neurology. So by reading that, in seeing that forward head posture, you can get an idea of how the body's adapted to that. And then next thing you know, you're flying up. We're having lunch, and we went over all of it. And then you're like, you got to be a bunion guy. And I'm like, I don't want to be a bunion guy. Like that is not something I want to be known for. But you can correct a lot of this stuff while you sleep. And you're like, what are you talking about? Tell me more about that. And that's why now I am in the sleep world, is because of you in that day.
Yeah, we as you were driving me back to the airport, we kind of brainstormed or I did. I gave you some ideas, and I just, just off the cuff, and inspired you to start a whole new business and a whole new career path because of that day. So, but I just want to reflect back on it too, because you reminded me. I forgot that was the initial motivation and catalyst to visit you in Boston was for my bunion. And to give you an update, like 10 years later, I still have the bunion. They're hard to treat. Ideally you want to get it early on, and correct it so that you don't have this, because it's a bone deformity. And maybe at some point I'll figure out how to reverse that specifically. It's a really difficult one though, but it hasn't progressed, and it's certainly not painful. So, and I've addressed it with other areas structurally in the foot and the hips. And there was actually another chiropractor, Mark Working. I don't know if you're aware of him, but he was just specialized in the foot and was really, really good. Unfortunately, he passed away from a medical error. Yeah, he died a few years ago, but he treated me. I think he could have reversed it. I really do, but he passed far too soon. But anyway, that's a different area. But why don't we go pivot back to the observation that I think this is valid. You can look it up on your AIs and find out, or a search engine, or Perplexity, which is the best search engine, because they'll give you citations to show exactly what they're stating is true. But the incidence of cervical degeneration is about 80% in adults. So maybe let's just start there.
Yeah, so everything, the body, your reality is a product of adaptation, and this is really what I tell people. And when you mentioned I'm an exercise physiologist. I don't know if we did, and a kinesiologist, and I went through physical therapy training. And when you look at the research, and there's a lot of discrepancy within the research of what causes arthritis, what causes degeneration. But degeneration purely is an adaptation to lack of movement. The body doesn't make mistakes. It's doing it for a reason. So if I put your arm in a cast, the body is going to adapt by atrophying the joint. If anybody's had their arm in a cast, you take the cast off. The cast is creating stability artificially, and the body adapts. The first thing it's going to do is say, listen, if you're not going to use the water in that joint, we're going to pull the water out and give it to someplace else where you're going to use it. So it dehydrates the joint. And that dehydration causes that atrophy within the joint, which we specifically know now as degeneration. So
or shrinking too.
Shrinking, atrophy, muscle weakness. And then as the joint atrophies, the disc bulges. Well, that's unstable. So the body now creates bone spurs around it to protect it. And it's creating this, what we know now is arthritis, and we think it's a bad thing. But what it's doing, it's adapting to intersegmental lack of movement due to altered biomechanics. So what happens is somebody is a child. They have a whiplash. They fall off a bicycle. Their birth process, they get pulled out of the canal wrong. So from the point that injury causes scar tissue restricts movement, and then we couple that with poor sleeping positions and being on computers all day, then more and more scar tissue develops in the neck, and that's what causes the atrophy in the cervical spine. It's an adaptation to intersegmental loss of movement.
Yes, indeed. Movement is so crucial. Let me just pivot back a bit to mention that many times the cervical degeneration is associated with pain. I've never had neck pain. And the reason I'm saying that is that most people with this probably don't experience back neck pain, but that doesn't mean you're not heading for a disaster. And that's why I'm so happy that I listened to Peter and really implemented a program, which we're going to talk about in a bit, but I want to set the foundation for it before I discuss it. So just because you don't have symptoms yet in your neck doesn't mean you don't have a problem. And there's techniques you can actually. I was relatively opposed to doing spinal X-rays for this type of assessment, but I've changed my view, especially if you're seeing a clinician who has a digital X-ray, which is like 90% less of the radiation. It's relatively small. I mean, it's a fine, and there's things that you can do, especially if you're healthy, that will mitigate against that ionizing radiation. But the other point I wanted to mention that I didn't appreciate at the time, and I've only recently, is I've encountered Ray Pete's work about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago to the week precisely. He passed away right around Thanksgiving in 2022, literally a few days before ChatGPT 3.0 was launched, which was a massive event because it was the first technological deployment that reached 100 million users in less than a month. Less than a month. This is mind blowing. But anyway, what I've learned from Dr. Pete's work is that in addition to this lack of movement that you referenced, there's also an issue of having enough cellular energy. And we have an epidemic of people not making enough energy. And we're not going to go into it now, but I just want to mention that that's another factor because this loss, this dehydration that occurs in the disc can be also, there's no questions lack of movement, but I'm absolutely convinced that it's this loss of cellular energy. And the other part is not insufficient amount of collagen. Collagen is the most common protein in the human body, the most common. One out of every 3 proteins in your body is collagen. So that's kind of a clue. It probably plays an important role. And you would think, since it's very specific amino acids, there's like 3, proline, hydroxyproline, and glycine, that and are not commonly used. And they're really, because they're not consumed, is what I meant to say. Because most of those amino acids are in collagen tissue, which is connective tissue, and very few of us are eating that. We used to eat nose to tail, and even before you were born, it was shortly before you were born, common to have Jell-O as a dessert. But how many people have Jell-O? And Jell-O is gelatin, which is connective tissue. It's the same thing as collagen. Gelatin and collagen are identical molecules. It's a different form of processing. So if you're not getting enough connective tissue, collagen, gelatin in your diet, you will not have the building blocks to create the connective tissue to support those discs. They're going to collapse because there's not enough strength. You don't have the raw materials to build that. So I think it's a combination of things. There's clearly movement, support. I just don't want to create an illusion or give them any information that's confusing, because it like most of health, it's a complex set of variables that contribute to the problem. And it's not just addressing the posture, but addressing the posture, your cellular energy, and the right types of building blocks so you can build up your tissue.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point, because when you look at, I've taken tens and tens of thousands of X-rays, mm-hmm. and this is really this is a common question that a lot of my patients and clients give me. They say, well, how do you know that it's injury here and it wasn't like, what's the camel, the straw that broke the camel's back, or chicken or the egg? Well, if it was normal, if this degeneration was normal and it wasn't adaptive to something, then every joint would have degeneration. Mm-hmm. This is so specific. Typically, when you have degeneration in the cervical spine, it's at C5, C6, C6, C7. Like, mm-hmm. Why those areas? Why not at Atlas?
Those are 2 segments, though, that you're referring to, right?
Okay, yeah. So within the cervical spine, you have 7 bones, right? And then you have 7 bones within the cervical spine. The typical injury is at the lower ones. It's at C5, C6, C6, C7. Why that's important is because those bones have the most amount of flexion extension. They got no rotation. And when you do damage, most of it's whipping. And most of it's because we're forward head posture. Most of it's because our chins are tucked. We typically do damage in flexion and extension. And because of the way that we sleep and other things, we do not challenge it. And then you have the segments above and below making up for it. And we think, and this is a great point that you made earlier, most people don't have pain with this. Mm-hmm. They have adaptive issues with the lower back issue. They have hip issues. They have shoulder issues, but they never relate it to cervical problems because typically you don't have a lot of neck pain when you have this.
Yeah, that is a key point. And, normally pain is a signal that our body gives us. And thank God we have pain. A lot of people, are sad about the fact that they have pain, but if they didn't have it, there's a clinical condition that's called leprosy, which essentially kills the nerves that contribute to that feedback for the sensory nerves, and you don't have pain, and that's why people with leprosy don't die from the bug itself, but the secondary complications, the infections that result from not reacting to taking your hand off a hot plate or something, or getting an injury in your leg and not knowing it's there, so it just goes on and you get infected and they have to get an amputation. It's a serious problem, but you need pain, but there's no pain in this thing. So there's no warning signal. The typical warning signals aren't going to help you here.
Yeah, and there was a book that was written on that. It's called Pain, the Gift Nobody Wants.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It is. It's a gift. But the issue is, and what the paradox is, it's the same thing, and I always use analogies because how my ADD brain works, is you put a cast on your arm. At the beginning, you're going to have shoulder issues and wrist issues. But the problem is, the longer you keep the cast on, there's no pain in the elbow, none whatsoever. But you keep that cast on for 5 years, silently you're getting degenerative changes that are asymptomatic, and then you take the cast off, and it's a nightmare. And that's the thing that happens. The more chronic a condition is becoming, the less pain, the body shuts off the pain sensors because they numb and they dull. So it's feeling versus function. And we have to understand that chronic pain that goes away typically turns into some sort of chronic illness internally because you're just internalizing it deeper. It's like having a car that has a bent axle where you just keep wearing down the tire and you keep replacing the tire, but eventually you're going to have an issue deeper on that's going to cause more problems.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that cast analogy. I just wanted to provide a little pearl and tip for people who do suffer an injury where they require a cast. And there is something that you can do to prevent that disuse atrophy that occurs. And that's simply, there's a device called Katsu, which I've talked about quite a bit in the past. And it's a form of compression that's usually put on the upper arms, right by about as far as you can to the shoulder on both sides, and in your inguinal area too on the legs. But if you have a cast in those areas and you use this device and you exercise with it on, there have been well documented cases where the arm that is in the cast is actually even bigger than the other arm and there's no disuse atrophy at all, which is pretty amazing. So, there's a way around that. And if you have an arm cast that goes over the shoulder, you're not going to be able to do that because you can't get the compression band in there. But most of the casts are not up to the shoulder, so it's an interesting alternative to that, or not alternative solution to preventing that, because it's a common problem.
Yeah.
All right, so we've identified the problem and alerted people this is an issue, and you likely have it. I guess maybe outside of an X-ray, are there any strategies that someone could use to identify it? Yeah, to know that they have this or at really high risk for it.
Yeah, so it's visual. Visual. Like look at your posture. But what we typically do, and I love this, is we put people you have two bilateral scales on the bottom on the ground.
Identical scales.
Scales like Taylor scales are like $9 on Amazon. You buy two of them, and then you stand on them. And your body, as long as it's in alignment, right? Body posture adjusts to head position. It's the righting reflex. So if your body is in alignment, you're going to stand straight. If you're 100 pounds, you're going to put 50 pounds of body weight on one side and 50 pounds of body weight on the other side. If you have dysfunction, what's going to happen is your body weight's going to lean to one side. So you're going to, let's say, put 75 pounds on one side, 25 pounds on the other side. This is a way that we analyze if children are going to have scoliosis versus screening them. We put them on two bilateral scales. If their body weight is off more than 10% to one side, the spine's curving and adapting all the way up. But that's usually due to forward head posture. We're seeing children in our office at 10 years old with stage 1 degenerative changes because of how much time they're putting in the seats in classrooms and coupled with poor pillow placement.
Well, and also staring at the devices too,
Yeah.
which is forward head flexion. Um, so that's a simple way to do it. Just stand on those. And would it be accurate to say that most of the time when you find a discrepancy between the two readings, it's going to be due to this forward head posture?
It's going to be, it's due because body posture adjusts to head position. Then the other one, which you and me have talked about in the past, is just testing your balance on a wobble board, or just testing your balance on like a 3-dimensional thing that challenges your balance. Because if your head posture is off, your balance is off all the way down to your feet. See, when people build a house, they always think about strong foundation, strong core, then build the foundation from the bottom up. The body works the opposite. It works through the righting reflex, leveling the eyes all the way down. So the body wants to keep the eyes level at all costs. So if you have degenerative changes within the cervical spine, body posture adjusts from the top all the way down.
So the righting reflex, another way of looking at it is your head's like a gyroscope. It's always going to take the same position, and the body compensates.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so because you want to see things, otherwise you're looking at the world tilted, and that's not fun.
Nope. Yeah, the body wants to level the eyes, and then due to Davis's law and Wolff's law, the body, tissue remolds based on the stresses that are applied. So if you're, what's the greatest amount of time you're potentially in one position is at night when you're sleeping, and you can remold. If I want somebody to have a bent arm, all I do is I grab their arm, I bend it. I hold it there for days and days and days and weeks, and their arm will bend. So think about what you're doing at night while you're sleeping, especially when if you're sleeping and you have your face jammed in against a pillow, you're crushing your maxillary sinuses and facial bone structures while you sleep. So got to be really, really careful when you're putting your body into a specific position for prolonged periods of time, the effect that that's having on your spine.
Yeah, so before we go into the posture while you're sleeping, you mentioned the Wobble board, which is an interesting device, not terribly expensive. You can pick them up online, and they're about $50 or so, and they last. They really don't break for the most part. This is something it's a lifetime thing. It's just, there's not a consumable part of it, but it's a really good device that doesn't take much time, but you can just develop your sense of balance or proprioception. So why don't you describe how someone could use this to improve their balance, and then secondarily improve the likelihood that they will improve the cervical degeneration?
Yeah, so we're working with wobble boards for 10 years, 15 years. And now we're producing one that you can actually gamify it, so it attaches to a screen, and you got to keep a target in the middle and working on balance. So one of the things that you'll notice as people age, what's the one thing that you notice is that their posture comes forward. They lean into brain atrophy. So as somebody's cognitive decline is moving forward, they're also losing their balance at the same time. There's a specific portion in the brain called the vermis. The vermis, if you Wikipedia it or you look at it, one of the functions...
we don't use Wikipedia. Yeah.
Or you look into it.
Yeah, look into it with the more sophisticated AI search engines like Perplexity that can give you resources. They give you one answer. You don't get, like, when you type in vermis, you get all these other definitions. There's a whole revolution that's occurring in search. And finally, thank God, Google has been exposed for the monopoly that they are, and the U.S. Department of Justice has ordered them to sell off their web browser because they've been a monopoly. And not only they're a monopoly, even worse, they're giving you misinformation. They don't give you the answers that you're looking for, and they're spreading. They're guilty of spreading misinformation. But anyway, that's it. It's almost a moot issue at this point because they've done it for so long, because there's real alternatives you can use that are much better. And the biggest one is Perplexity. It's just like the word sounds, perplexity.ai. And you can use it for free, and it takes a little bit longer than Google, maybe a few seconds instead of less than a second. But you can type in vermis on that, especially when the context of what is the vermis in the brain, it'll take you 30 seconds. You'll have the answer and the references for it, which is great.
And you'll notice the vermis in the brain, what develops the vermis is something that's called proprioception. That's what you're losing with cervical atrophy, because 80% of all of your proprioceptive signals are in the cervical spine.
Now,
So
I have a quick question. Is now normally think of balance as the cerebellum. So is the vermis in the cerebellum?
The vermis is in the cerebellum.
Okay. All right.
It's
good.
a portion of the cerebellum that coordinates balance.
Okay.
So when you're looking at the vermis, one of the functions of the vermis, and this was really critical to all of our processes and principles when we were developing 15 years ago, when they connected the vermis to the prefrontal cortex, which is executive functioning. So what they're doing now in the ADD space is they're putting kids specifically, or they worked on it a lot for years, but they're putting kids on wobble boards and they're working on their balance, because what we find is due to loss of balance, you're atrophying the prefrontal cortex. So as the spine degenerates, you're weakening the vermis and you're becoming more anxious, which is more difficult to sleep. But so when we work on maintaining spinal structure, we want to do first we want to remold the spine while we sleep. Then during the day, we want to get on a wobble board and start challenging our vermis. That does two things. It improves our posture, and all of the signals from the brain down to the musculature, all the way down to the feet. And by working just on our balance alone, you're going to rebuild all of the neurological signals down through the core.
Perfect. All right. So that's one strategy you can have. And I think you probably mentioned to me a while ago, I didn't realize you're getting close to having that product available for gamifying the wobble board. When will that be available?
It's going to be available this year.
All right, good.
Well, it's going to
2024.
be within the year, yeah.
Within a year.
We're only months away. We already did the prototypes, and now it's in the patent process.
All right, well, good. Congratulations. That's a really important product because people enjoy games, and if there's not some competition element to it, then it's a little bit more challenging to implement. All right, so I think now we can go to the main intervention that you can use that is so simple, so easy to do, and can have such a profound difference. And it's not really a lot of extra effort. Like it's less effort than a wobble board, if you can imagine that. So, and you get probably more benefit. And not to say that you shouldn't do the wobble board. That's not a mark against it. No, I think you should do both of them. But with respect to ease of implementation, this pillow support of your neck in the proper alignment is a no-brainer. So why don't you explore that for a moment?
All right. So we came up with this concept. It's called the triune of sleep, the sleep triune. So what happens is the first thing we want to start with is body alignment, then the subconscious brain, then get the conscious brain out of the way. Why is alignment so important? Well, just like we said, body posture adjust to head position. So the positioning of your head. And then due to the other two laws, Davis' law and Wolff's law, tissue remolds based on the stresses applied. So if you're putting yourself into a position that you fall asleep in, most people fall asleep in a position that they believe they're comfortable in, but their subconscious brain feels safe. All the subconscious brain wants is safety.
So it's usually a fetal position.
Fetal position, because safety is curled up in a ball. Like when I grew up in Malden, Massachusetts, on a busy street, people used to bang on my window when I was a child. And I was petrified that it was going to, when my parents told me to go to sleep, that it was going to be taken away. So I put all of the stuffed animals around me, and I could only fall asleep when I felt safe. So when the subconscious brain thinks that it's comfortable, it isn't. It's just safe because it's curled up in a ball. Now, one of the issues when we talk about alignment when we sleep and how to use a pillow, we tell people, oh, yeah, it's easy. It's very easy to put yourself into this position, but it is not easy to fall asleep in this position, because what we find, and you're a machine, Dr. Mercola. You're like, yeah, okay, you want to sleep in this position? You're just going to put yourself in that position until you fall asleep. Most people, you're probably 1% of my entire avatar.
No,
right?
no. It's
You,
point one,
the
point
point,
one of
point,
1/10 of 1%.
So with most people, the conscious brain is where all the excuses are. When they hear the position we're going to tell them, they're going to be like, I can't, I snore, I have sleep apnea. All of these things consciously are going to come into play because of their previous experiences with the
Otherwise
position.
known as excuses.
It is excuses. So the position that somebody wants to be in is on their back. And through surveys of thousands of people, that's 30% of the entire population. 70% of the population does not fall asleep on their back because, as we have identified, their avatars, we do these animal sleep avatars. They are either armadillos or they're ostriches. They want protection. They need that safety feeling. I would guess that you're a gorilla because you can fall asleep anywhere and you have confidence and security, but that is not the cross section of our entire culture. So you want to fall asleep on your back, and what's critically important is the type of pillow that you use and that your head is not supported. That is super important. Picture you're just supporting your neck with the pillow.
Yeah, but it's not your head, but it's your neck that's supported.
Yes.
You don't want to support. So your head should be literally almost like off a fulcrum. Right. There you go. So there's nothing supporting your head. Nothing touching
you want to support your neck.
The crown,
but the
right.
weight of your head needs to be off of the back of the pillow. It only needs to be about 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch off of the bed. But you want the weight of your head basically working like gently distracting a curve into your neck. Because in the absence of stress, like putting your arm in a cast, the body will atrophy. So if you support the head and the neck at the same time for 8 hours with no stress applied, like what cervical pillows do, you are atrophying the cervical spine. So anytime you use the word support in the body is weakened. That's the adaptation to support. So when you use when you support the cervical spine, but you use the weight of the head off the back of the pillow, that's stress is a stress applied. So you're actually restructuring the cervical curve, changing your entire posture while you sleep. And the lifestyle habit is not to think about the entire night like this. All you need to do is fall asleep like this, and then through programs and protocols, we can teach your subconscious brain how to stay like that. But the lifestyle habit is to use the pillow the right way so that you fall asleep and just fall asleep like that. Even if you only put an hour in like that, that's an hour of cervical distraction. Over 7 days, it's 7 hours. And then over, 4 weeks, it's 28 hours.
Yeah, and you can look at it as a form of exercise. It's like an isometric exercise where you're causing that stretching your system and pushing it in the extension, which most people don't do. What percentage of the time do you think people are in cervical flexion versus extension?
During the day?
During the day, yeah. All day. It's like almost 100%.
Because body part. So, like most people, they're like, "Oh, let me think about my posture." You're only thinking. I think on average 5% of the day. 95% is happening by subconscious programming. So if you're thinking about your posture and you get a phone call and now you're starting to talk to somebody, your body is going into this posture. I will tell people in my office, oh yeah, they're on their phone like this, and I'm like, oh, sit up. And then when they stop thinking and talking again, their body goes into these old neurological patterns. So in order to get out of pain or in order to restructure, you don't train, can't think about it. You need to train the subconscious brain. So we do that by stretching the spine just over a period of time You gently stretch that curve by using the pillow correctly over 8 hours, and then you reinforce that by working on balance work, and then the neurology will change, and the curve will restructure, and then that improves the function, which is critically important, of the vagus nerve, because vasovagal tone improves as you improve the curve in your cervical spine.
Good. So I neglected to point out to people, and may not be obvious as you're watching the video part, but Dr. Martone is not wearing scrubs. Those are pajamas,
They
which
are
is his.
pajamas.
Yeah, so his pajamas that he has to emphasize the fact that he is focused in sleep management. So, and this cervical pillow that he just described is a big part of it. It's one of the major parts of it. So let's pivot back to the sleeping on your back. There are some of the strategies you can use, and one that you should use universally, and I think almost everyone should do it, regardless of whether or not you're sleeping on your back, and that is using paper tape over your mouth to make sure you are not mouth breathing, because this is non-controversial. Now, sleeping on the cervical pillow might be controversial. I don't think it is. I've been doing it for 10 years, and I haven't had a cervical x-ray for a while. I think you saw the last one. I think it was radically improved. My disc started swelling back up, and I don't have the degeneration anymore. I think that, would you agree with that assessment? Like, just hard for me to
Yeah.
remember.
So more importantly, you rehydrated your disc,
Yeah.
but the curve is coming back. So your head is in a way better position, which is what is causing the bunion down all the way to the bottom of your foot to not progress, because
Yeah.
bunions from that forward head posture.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just to emphasize the point you just mentioned. So, thankfully, I was aware and paid attention to Peter's warnings 10 years ago. And now, 10 years later, at the age of 70, I don't have symptomatic or even asymptomatic cervical degeneration. It's pretty much close to normal at this point. Thanks to listening and following simple advice. This does not take a lot of time. It's just a matter of adjusting yourself to sleep on your back with paper tape, because you don't want to be breathing through your mouth. That is highly problematic, and it will definitely not promote your health. It'll start taking away from it. It's counterproductive. So that's the last thing you want to do. And the paper tape is simple, inexpensive, and the only time you can't really use it is if you have a upper respiratory infection like a cold, because usually your sinuses get, and you have to breathe through your mouth, otherwise you'll die. So why don't you expand on that a bit?
Yeah. So, obviously, when you're looking at new positionings and changing things, and people, let's say, have tried it because they hurt their shoulder and now they're sleeping on their back, but their mouth goes dry or they snore, there are many issues that come up when you start to change positioning, especially on your back. And one of them is airway management. So airway management is such where you do want to breathe out of your nose. You do not want to be breathing out of your mouth when you sleep. So we've never really been taught to breathe correctly, right? Because nobody ever thinks about their breath. And when they sleep on their back, they're typically putting a pillow underneath their head, which is closing down their airway. But when you put a pillow under your neck is an extension. You cannot close your airway. The tongue cannot obstruct the airway because the neck is an extension and it actually opens up the airway. So now we need to manage keeping your mouth shut. Well, how do you do that? You can do it by mouth taping, which is a very effective way of keeping the mouth closed. There are new companies that are coming up with different ways to mouth tape, that some people, the mouth tape irritates them, some people it doesn't. And then you can also use your covers underneath between your chin and your chest, keeping your neck back. And that also keeps the neck into extension and can keep your jaw closed. That's what I end up doing. And it acts as two things. It keeps your head into that position and it keeps my mouth closed. Sometimes I'll use mouth tape if I'm traveling or I'm doing different things like that and I don't have my setup like I do at home. Also, you want to suck your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Practice that while you're sleeping so that you can, properly get that tongue opening up the maxillary sinuses, because a lot of times we don't keep our mouth shut effectively. So there are different techniques that you can use to keep the mouth shut.
Well, the tip of your mouth to the roof of the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth is something that I would encourage everyone to consider doing all the time, even while you're awake and conscious, because that you're right. That is exactly where the tongue's supposed to be. It should be there regularly. And if you do this repetitively, you can actually train yourself to be automatic, and you never have to think about it. It's going to take a few months to do that, but my tongue is always at the roof of my mouth, unless I'm eating. It's because it's a reflex. It's you facilitate the pathway there. It's called neuroplasticity that does this, and your brain develops a pathway and it's facilitated, and it's just automatic at some point. So that's where you want it to be. And putting the neck into extension is interesting too, because if you ever watched anyone being intubated where they insert this endotracheal tube into their airway, they have to put the neck in extension, otherwise they'll never get that tube down there.
Yeah, and that research was done by anesthesiologists with what's the angle of the head while people are under anesthesia that keeps the airway open, and the neck has to be an extension.
That has to be.
Nobody's ever taught this. They're only taught to buy a more comfortable pillow that is not functional, that destroys the structure of their sleep. You see, beds and pillows are becoming more functional to be able to keep people in more unsustainable position that's destroying their spine. We need to start with body alignment in mind, and then work backwards, then create safety for the subconscious brain, and then teach the conscious brain how to get out of its own way. That's how we get way better sleep. It's not, let's just find something more comfortable and then try to fall asleep like that. You're going to hate your pillow. You're never going to find the right bed, and you're going to always wake up with shoulder pain, hip pain, neck pain, because you're getting distorted and twisted at night, and this is what needs to change.
Okay, let's talk about the actual mattress too, since you're an expert in sleep. I've progressed to the point, and I believe that I've never discussed it with you, but I don't think we need that much support. And I think a minimalist approach is better. And I'm actually sleeping on a mattress that is not 12 inches. It's not 10. It's not 6. It's not 4. It's 2 inches. 2 inches is my mattress. Basically, the next step is sleeping on the floor. So what are your thoughts on the mattress support?
So remember what we talked about. Support strengthens or weakens. Support weakens, right? So we use arch support to support our arch. You support the arch, you're going to have an issue with your arch. Now, in bed, when you lie back, does your back naturally go into extension or round off and go into flexion? When you lie on your back, it's like your lumbar spine is like a suspension bridge. It is actually the shape of the structure that creates support. So you don't need support of the lower back because the structure creates a suspension bridge, per se. So you don't need all of this support. The only reason you need support, or they need to be softer or weaker, is because you're falling into the mattress trying to sustain longer periods of time into these twisted positions. So listen, 2 inches is a little bit small for me. but,
works for me. I've been doing it for a few years now.
I know you have. And listen, it's great. I mean, structurally, it's great, right? Because you're going to make your body stronger. It just takes a lot to get to that type of adaptation for your body to be able to do that. Like I told you, you're not the norm, right? And, but in general, is more support better or worse? More support is worse. But to go from a lot of support to very little support,
I didn't do it all at once either. You have to do it gradually. Your body has to adapt. Now, one of the other complications you didn't mention, but I actually experienced a complication of sleeping on my side. I thought that was the right way to do it. It's largely because of getting into that fetal position. You feel more secure and safe, I think. But I always used to sleep on my left side, which I think is probably most common for people sleeping on the side. I don't know which side it is, but anyways, my left. And I developed shoulder complications from that. Absolutely. And they disappeared once I started sleeping on my back. Now, I also, about the same time, engaged in debt hanging every day. And it's something I also recommend. Very, very helpful for the shoulders. And, most people can only debt hang for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. But if you can get up to a minute and do that a few times a day, it's going to change your life. And the only complication is you will get calluses for debt hanging. There's no way around it. But I strongly recommend that because you'll almost have bulletproof shoulders if you're hanging that much.
Yeah,
But
and one of the things that hanging does is it innervates a muscle that is the major issue with all shoulder problems, and that's the inferior trap. Very, very misunderstood muscle. It causes the scapula to tract because it accesses below the center of gravity or the axis of rotation of the shoulder. And the only way to get the inferior trap is having your arms above your head and doing this reverse shoulder shrug. Nobody does that. So everybody has these rolled shoulders. And then when you sleep on your side, that further amplifies the rolled shoulder, which is a product of, if you stay in that position for a long period of time, you give me a side sleeper and I'm going to give you a shoulder problem. That's it. It's going to happen. Whether it's impingement syndrome when your arm's above your head, you're going to have a shoulder issue because you cannot lie on your side where the weight's distributed over the smallest surface area to fall asleep in that position. And I just want to make this one critically important point is when they talk about sleeping position, the gold standard study is a study that was done in 2015 to talk about lymphatic drainage. And in that study, there's a significant statement. And this is critically important to understand because they talk about Alzheimer's with this study. They extrapolate this study to all aspects of lymphatic drainage. And that study was done on rodents. And there's a significant statement at the top of that study that says, listen, we know that this was done on rodents, but we're extrapolating that the same position is good for humans. In the structure of the cervical spine of a rodent is completely opposite the structure of the cervical spine for a human. And their body weight distributed their body weight is distributed over the greatest surface areas on their side. So what's good for a rodent is not good for a human because lymphatic drainage is critically important to be able to have cervical alignment because that is where the flow happens through the spinal cord. And if we use that extrapolation of side sleeping position, saying that animals and humans need to sleep in the same structural positioning, that's one vertical, and they're totally disrepresenting the structure of the human cervical spine in far as sleep and sleep position. Drives me crazy. Sorry.
Yeah, well, as you were speaking, I was just reflecting on the fact of how astonishing this is, and this is why I'm so enamored with this approach, that you can do something so simple, so inexpensive to address a pervasive problem that almost all of us struggle with. And it's so easy. It's a nearly perfect illustration of what I believe is the goal for all these types of interventions. Inexpensive, safe, virtually no side effects, and solves a long-term problem. So this is why I'm so enamored with it. And I just really, I'm grateful for you helping me understand this, because otherwise I would have been a side sleeper and, been crippled up probably. And now I'm able to enjoy life with full mobility and no pain. And it's wonderful.
Yeah. And I like it's hard, easy versus easy, hard, right? It seems easy, but to change that
the transition is hard.
takes work, and that's why we have this program to help people understand how to do it by a step-by-step process. And because there are going to be problems that are overcome. People like you and I, like my why was because I had herniated my disc. I reviewed 3,000 x-rays and found that the problem wasn't in my lower back. It was an issue with my neck, and I picked up the rotation in my lower back. So my why was either, not practice again or theorize if I fixed the curve in my neck, I could help my disc problem. And that's, in a sense, what happened, which is how I came up with all of these about
Yeah.
18 years ago. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then so my why was I just stayed like that. I didn't care. I was a side sleeper. I loved sleeping. I had my little still animals around my head. I love that protection. And it was very exposed when I slept on my back, and it took a lot of self-discipline to do it. Because if the why's big enough, the what doesn't matter. And if people are like, oh, let me just try to sleep on my back tonight because they heard this and they thought it was good, if their why is big enough, they're just going to go back to side sleeping. So we need to, that's why I liked how we started this. We explain how important cervical structure isn't just to overall posture, but it's going to also affect their health because it increases vagal tone, which affects digestion issues, immune system issues, and hormonal imbalances.
Okay, so why don't we go back to the pillow itself? When we first met when I first visited your office in Boston, because we had met many years before that, um, you explained the concept you had of the support, and I was interested and intrigued, but mostly dismissive because
But that's your nature, right? The first thing you're going to do is dismiss.
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, so because you took a down pillow, took some of the down out, which I'm not a big fan of down pillows in any way, shape, or form. It's a huge problem because they attract dust and dust mites more specifically, and the dust mite feces is massively allergic to a lot of people. So, but anyway, it does work. The material does work, and you had it. I'll let you discuss how you had to support and cradle the neck to get into this safe mode, where it's somewhat insulating your sound and clearly feel supported and safer for sure. So discuss that, and then just I think it's about a year ago that I connected with you again and said, "Listen, I've got an idea. I want to change the pillow design because I was frustrated with that design. I could not easily and consistently get my head to the position where it was off the pillow. It would that pillow, damn pillow, would come back all the time, and my head would be up, and that's not what you want. And now, consistently, most of the night, my head is on the bed. On the bed, no pillow. It's on the bed. So you can be on the bed. More ideally is a little bit up, like a quarter inch or so, eighth of an inch. But the perfect is just touching it. Almost no pressure. But you can put a piece of paper in there. It would be perfect. It's hard to get though, because when you move, it's going to change. But anyway, I couldn't do that, so we redesigned the pillow. I was a catalyst for that with the butterfly pillow, which we'll talk about. But why don't you talk about the transition and progression we went through?
Yeah. So you text me. It's like, listen, I want a different design. I want the same effect, but a design that's a little bit easier. And you and me went back and forth, and then we came up with a pillow design. In this pillow design, same thing. It goes right underneath your neck. It's a lot easier to use. We used a different fill, but what it does is it keeps that neck in extension. And then we added a fasten device, which at the beginning I didn't know how it would work because we were talking about straps and things.
Yeah, I did straps, and then we realized a snap would be the best way.
We went through different things. We had engineers come up with different ideas, but I really like the design that we ended up coming up with.
It's beautiful. It's the pillow for the rest of my life, and it's so beautiful. You can take it with you. You. It fits easily into your suitcase.
Yeah, and then
you
can snap it. Easy design, right? Slight snap. Almost looks like one of the pillows that you would get that on a plane.
Sleep on the airplane. Yes.
Sleep on an airplane.
I never thought of that because I don't really do that much traveling anymore. But I guess you could. Did you ever try it or consider using it as an alternative to those plane pillows?
Yeah, I when I travel, I typically use the longer design neck nest to put underneath my chin so I don't bob my head down. I don't like the pillow against the plane because you're already.
Oh yeah, inflection.
There's not much space there, so I never use those. I like air and using like an air design. But the one thing that is really important when you use this pillow is it puts your shoulders on the bed, at the same time of having your neck supported, and then your head is just off of the back. Like you said, if it's touching the bed, it's not going to touch the bed the entire night. Your head is like kind of in this slinky suspended space, and we're talking about gentle distraction. We're not trying to put a block of wood under your neck and just have your head hang off the back, because you would never be able to get to that point. It would just cause so much stress to the tissue and actually damage the tissue. So it's light distraction over 8 hours, which is transformational changes within the cervical spine. And then as the cervical spine slowly changes over a period of time, you're going to start to see it untwisting. You're going to notice your lower back pain goes away. Knee issues go away. Shoulder starts to feel better. You're going to be like, just by sleeping in one position, it's a game changer.
I couldn't agree more. So there's two models now, though. The original neck nest, you have that there to show people?
Yes. So we have original neck nest right here. Yeah. Original neck nest.
Oh yeah, that was which is a redesign from the down pillow.
Which is a redesign from the down one. We with taking your inputs, we pulled the down out of the pillow. You've been transformational for this whole sleep process. So you say that I helped you understand that sleep is becoming a major transformation in your life, and you've helped me create an entire company based on sleep. And then we have the Mercola Perfect Posture Pillow that we did. This is our most recent design, which is a simpler design. It's a lot easier to use and puts your head in the same position as the neck nest does.
Well, ostensibly, you can do it. I can't. I couldn't do it. That's why I designed that. Yeah. Because I said this had to be, and actually found another company. It's much smaller. Do we make a travel version of this too? Probably not.
Not yet.
Okay, yeah, because there's a travel version that will work. Literally, you could almost fit. You can easily put it in two of your hands, almost one hand. It's so small, or you put it in a big pocket. I mean, it's small, and it'll do the same thing. It's not quite as useful, but it's close. It's close enough when you travel, so you can, if you only have a carry-on, easily put it in your carry-on. You could put this one, but it would take most of the space up for your carry-on.
And then one of the things too with traveling, because I'm big in, especially within our programs, talking about traveling, is the first night you're in a hotel, first off, your body doesn't want to sleep on its back. It doesn't feel protected in a hotel. So you and I have talked about a lot about like sleeping slightly sitting up, right? Slightly elevated. What I like to do with both of these pillows is take the pillows on the bed and just put them down and use sleep slightly elevated. So you put one pillow down, then the other pillow behind it, then the neck nest or the Mercola Posture Perfect pillow on your neck, and then put pillows on you, all around you. Create this safe cocoon pressure type of feeling. Because ultimately, just like growing up in Malden, Massachusetts, when I used to use the animals, or if your kids don't sleep and they won't sleep in their own room, put all these stuffed animals around them. And when you travel, do that also in your hotel room, and you'll sleep way better that first night.
Yeah, I know that for most people it might sound crazy, but it's true. And I would really integrate that. And most of the hotel rooms I go, there's at least 4, if not 6 or even 8 pillows. It's kind of annoying how many pillows they put on, but there's usually more than enough pillows to accomplish what you're thinking. But so you're suggesting you put additionally the pillows under your legs. So you like a reverse Trendelenburg.
Basically, yeah. So you put the pillow starting from your hips. So you put one pillow down at the head of the bed, then another pillow right flat on the bed. Then your design pillow goes on the back pillow, so you're sitting slightly elevated from your hips
30 degrees. 30 degrees.
Yeah. So about 6 inches. 6 or 7 inches up is typically where you want to be. So I don't know.
Good. Yeah, I've sort of, my sleeping patterns have adjusted yet again. I did an extensive renovation of my bedroom, pretty expensive, to shield it from EMFs, because I don't live in a densely urban area, but it is an urban area. So there's a lot of uh, EMF out there. So I reduced it by like 99%, but then I put my sleep tent, my EMF sleep tent. So I'm now sleeping in the tent too, on top of that. So I basically have virtually, it's almost unmeasurable EMF in my tent. And it made
Yeah.
a big difference in my sleep. I'm telling you, with my dietary changes now and the collagen and sunlight exposure, I only need 6 hours of sleep, and typically I can go 4.5, 5, and be fine. But but it's usually closer to 5.5. Which I have a crazy sleep schedule. I go to bed typically at 6 at night, and I'm off at midnight. Typically midnight. Sometimes I get up when people ask me what time I get up. I say, "Oh, I got up yesterday."
Yeah, like again, let's put this in for 99.9% of the population.
Yeah,
That
it's unusual, but
yeah. Go
But
ahead.
what you can do is just your biology can be optimized. And I don't think the converse. And the reason why is that time at night when you're I call it the sacred time. That is after midnight to there's no distraction, so you can really get a lot of things done. I mean, especially deep thinking things where you can connect to yourself much better and more effectively. There's because of the lack of distractions. So that's one of the reasons I do it, and I think there's a great benefit to it. But it's not for everyone. You have to do it slowly. But I think it's much better. See, most people do it the other way.
Other way, that's and then
That's a prescription for disaster. They go to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning, and then they're violating circadian rhythm. It looks like I'm violating, but not really, because I like now with the change in the times, I'm going to bed at sunset. It's specific. Now I get up 6 hours before sunrise, but it's still, I get up in the dark.
So what I explain to my patients, every hour of sleep before midnight's worth 2 hours of sleep after midnight. That's because when you're going to sleep within that circadian rhythm, you actually have an energy spike. If you're in deep sleep before that energy spike, what typically happens before midnight, and it's actually earlier in the winter time, you are actually getting more deep cellular healing done because energetically you're in sleep at the right time. So you're absolutely correct. It is way better to go get less sleep before midnight than it is to get sleep after midnight, based on how.
No, I mean more sleep before midnight. More sleep.
Yeah. It's better to get more sleep before midnight than after midnight, and it's because of your body's core temperature. Your circadian rhythm is tied into body core temperature, and deep rhythmic sleep is tied into that temperature. So as your temperature drops, you're getting more deep restorative sleep, and it typically starts dropping right around, I think it's 8 p.m. if I'm not, if I'm mistaken. But you can change that with consistently going to bed at the same time.
Yeah, that's another good rule too. So if we adopt that as truth, and I'm not sure that it is truthful. I think there's some validity to it, but maybe it's not twice as much for every hour before midnight is 2. I would be getting 12 hours of sleep typically. So, but I think there's beneficial. So if you're going to try that and you find that it's useful for you, and I think it's useful for most people to get up earlier, because there's so much less distraction from your family members, phone calls and emails. And people just aren't moving around at night. Everything shuts down, so you can get things done that you really couldn't. The only problem with that is you have to pay attention to the light sources. So you really don't want blue light much before sunrise. When the sun's down, blue light is relatively toxic to your health. It's very beneficial to your health during the day, but it's toxic at night.
Yeah, I'd say a good bedtime on average would be about 9 p.m.
Yeah, for most people. I've already gotten
99.9%
I got by 9 o'clock. I've slept for 3 hours.
I know.
Which is really good. All right. So, are there any other sleep tips that you have for us?
Well, yeah. So one of the biggest things, right? So we start the body in alignment. We've created safety for the subconscious brain, right? We create safety with pressure. And then the last thing is the conscious brain. We got to get the conscious brain out of its own way. And in remembering that you can't think yourself to sleep. You have to remember yourself to sleep. So a lot of times people fall asleep thinking. They're thinking about their to-do lists. And the body doesn't care. Sleep is a neurological issue, right? It's a balance between the sympathetics and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetics are basically, in a sense, your awake nervous system, where if you run from a tiger, your body is going to be more awake. And your parasympathetic nervous system is more your thrive nervous system, where if you meditate and you slow down and you sleep, that's where your parasympathetic nervous system is at max. So you have awake and you have sleep. So the balance between the two is critically important to be able to understand how to get to sleep. So if you're thinking, you're more in that sympathetic brain. And if you're remembering and you're accessing your memories, you're going to transfer the energy more to that subconscious brain. And you want to focus on a memory in the past, rhythmic memory in the past. And if you remember, you're going to fall asleep, stay asleep, and you won't wake up thinking. So it's a difference between thinking and remembering is critically important to be able to fall asleep.
It just occurred to me I had two relatively recent modifications to my sleep schedule, and one is relative. Even just a few weeks ago, I started this habit, and I'm glad I did. I'm a big believer in sauna, and was somewhat skeptical of far infrared sauna, but I've come to realize after deeply studying this for a decade that the far infrared is actually pretty good. I thought that was confused and thought the near infrared was better. And it is if you can get the near infrared. The problem is with the near infrared, you have to get so close to the bulb that you really can't get the therapeutic dose that you need without burning yourself. So it'll still work because there's a lot those near infrared bulbs or heat lamps have a lot of far infrared. So it's essentially a far infrared sauna. It's just one other way to do it. But anyway, I've got I have a hybrid. I actually have a far infrared sauna that I have near infrared bulbs in if I need them for extra horsepower. But essentially, what I've done is I typically go in the sauna for about, depending on temperature, between 10 and 20 minutes. And I time it so that I exit the sauna between 30 and 45 minutes before I go to sleep. And that is amazing, absolutely amazing. And my sleep has radically improved since I've done that. Now, sauna is a stress, and one of the responses to your body of stress is to release cortisol. So what I've done also is I use progesterone. Progesterone is one of the single best ways to block cortisol. But you want to do it, I believe, transmucosally, not transdermally, and certainly not orally. And I've got information about it on my site, but I do that before I go into the sauna. And so that combination, my sleep scores range between 98 and 100 every night. Yeah. Now, last night I got a 99. The night before was 100. It's crazy. I mean, it's that good. And this is on anywhere between 5 and 6 hours of sleep a night. Sometimes, if I'm doing a forest for a while, then I'll have to do a 7. But, that's possible. If you dial these things in, you can do it.
Yeah, when you're in high heat situations, it's so good for your immune system. It's so good for so many different things, because getting that high heat within your system, and then when you get out of the sauna, what's going to happen is your core temperature is going to rapidly drop. And if you want the maximum, the time when your melatonin releases the most or the quickest is in that rapid drop of that core temperature. That's one of the best ways to stimulate somber, is to get into that. So I do a steam room. I don't.
You got to be careful with the steam, because you got to make sure they got a darn good filter on that water. Otherwise, you're going to be inhaling these disinfection byproducts.
Yeah, and then so if you get into that high heat situation, and then you get out, and then that core temperature drops, it's unbelievable for sleep. And make sure when you sleep, your hands and your feet, I love this, are outside of the covers, because when you get that high heat, you don't want that core to stay hot. So you want your temperature regulating out your hands and your feet, not your core body.
Unless it's really cold. Then there's a disadvantage to not keeping your core temperature high, because it takes energy to to create body
Yeah.
heat. And you don't want to be burning energy when you're sleeping.
Thick covers on your core, allowing the core to stay warm, but temperature regulating out your hands, just your hands and your feet. Because
this is another thing I've learned too, is the what material do you make your bedding with? Many people think cotton, organic cotton would be the best, and it's not. We're not even selling any of that anymore, and I'm discouraging people because it's a closed fiber. But there's the open fibers like silk would be probably one of the best, but it's very expensive. But there's something else called a eucalyptus. I don't know if you looked at eucalyptus as a fiber. Oh, it is the best, and it's less expensive than cotton, and the quality is. If you ever feel eucalyptus sheets, it's almost identical to silk. It feels silky smooth, and it's like silk, wool, and eucalyptus are the three primary ones. And if you're going to use, but actually, I love wool for anything outside my body, like wool underwear for sure, 100%, because it absorbs the sweat, releases it, and cotton doesn't do that. Cotton absorbs it and does not. It doesn't evaporate it. It's a huge problem. So I don't recommend cotton bed linens anymore.
That's interesting. I never heard the eucalyptus.
Oh yeah, you got to look it up, and it's relatively inexpensive. Relatively inexpensive. It's maybe 10 times lower than silk, but with almost the same benefits. Not quite as good as silk, but almost.
Nice, good. I like it.
All right, so I think unless you have anything else, I think we've covered most of the main topics.
I think we did. We hit on it, and like I said, if people have a tough time and they're questioning whether they can ever be a back sleeper, you don't have to be a back sleeper. The lifestyle habit is to start with your neck in this aligned position, and then the subconscious brain is going to take over. And it is normal to feel pain at the beginning, because as the tissue stretches into the right position, stretching tissue and changing mechanics can be a little bit discomfortable. So that pain will elicit change. Go ahead.
I'm not sure that I would go to the extent and call it pain, because if it's painful, you probably want to reconsider this. Pain is something you should honor and seek to avoid if you can, but it's uncomfortable for sure. I think that might be more accurate. It's uncomfortable. It's a big difference between uncomfortable and pain. If you're painful, I think you want to maybe do it more slowly or something. You should not be painful.
Yeah, and then when you put the neck into this position, right, and it's going to feel unsafe. It's not going to feel natural. It's not going to feel right. And then also one of the issues with the neck into extension, if somebody has a lot of degeneration, it's important to understand, or have a professional, have a chiropractor look at the spine, evaluate the spine, because some necks may need some work before they get into that extension. So, it's always good to contact a professional before you.
And I'm going to put a link to the series of exercises that we put together. You did the demonstration for it, because you mentioned at the beginning movement's important. So that's another thing you could add to this. These are movement. Again, it doesn't cost you anything to do these, except for the time to watch it and do it. That's it. There's nothing to buy. It's just moving your head through these ranges of motions on a regular basis can have enormous benefit to put that mobility back in and make sure that you don't get serious problems as you go older.
Motion is lotion, right?
That's right.
Motion is lotion for the joints. It keeps the joints moving, stimulates your brain. It's one of the best things that you can do. And there's no better there's no better way to maximize your health than to take time when you're doing pretty much nothing at night when you're sleeping to just implement these changes.
All right. Well, thanks for advancing this work and your contributions and providing resources that can really facilitate a good night's sleep. And more importantly, I think, is a healthy neck, which is something we all want. And 80% of people are not on their way to doing that. They're actually making themselves worse pretty much every day. So this is a simple strategy you can use to prevent that.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the platform to help the world get way better sleep.
All right, great. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, hit the like and subscribe button so you can get more videos. that can help you and your family take control of your health.